getting up there in the age, but honestly, yeah, these guys are actually still very young, still pretty fresh in their careers and everything, and have some exciting futures ahead of them. So let's jump in, introduce the players. Starting down here in the bottom left-hand side of the map, we have our red Protoss player. He is MaxPax. Max on.
And playing from Cascade, it is the Russian Protoss player SKillous. And SKillous is not your average Protoss player. He is a Protoss player that wants to be flashy. He's a Protoss player that wants to play like Beyond type thing. Like the only Protoss player that comes to mind as far as the way that he wants to play is partying, to be honest.
Yeah, it's, you know, I feel like there's a way I'd like to describe those kind of players. Like the players that really like to be flashy, that like to do really crazy moves and everything. It's like high risk, low reward players. But I know that sounds bad, but basically the way I put it is like the way that they'll sometimes make moves, it'll make judgment calls and say, I can gain, if I control this perfectly, like, and if they actually do it and they pull it off, they'll get a minor lead. If they mess up that control or they mess up a play, it'll be like potentially a big loss. A good example would be like being really aggressive with like your Warp Prism to Immortal drop micro or something, right? Or doing something really, really cheeky with like not a unit that does a lot of damage but doesn't really have a lot of hit points. So those kind of players, like they look for edges in everywhere they can find it. Sometimes even though it's like a bit of a risky maneuver, but they're very exciting to watch.
Yeah, definitely. And SKillous, while I am comparing him to partying, I think that he will like more often trend towards like mid games and even late games. But while he goes like while the clock advances, a lot of the time his tech doesn't, because he keeps up the pressure throughout, right? Like he'll make, for example, a lot of like blink stalkers and stuff like that, and units that are very micro intensive that you need to be babysitting all the time and so on and so forth. So I'm very interested to see what he brings to the series. He's always reinventing himself as a player as well. But I mean, when you talk about someone reinventing themselves, MaxPax is one of the most creative Protoss players that we have had in a very time, and creatives playing at the level that he's playing is not a thing that happens almost ever.
Yeah. Well, we already have MaxPax getting pretty aggressive with, I mean, the Probe actually buying time for the Zealot and the Adept to work away at this wall in. Obviously, they should not be able to break through this, but getting quite a bit of damage done to him, not gonna lie.
Yes, indeed. And SKillous actually opting to go for the Zealot. The Adept would be the better choice, but the Zealot was already there sooner, so, you know, you have to act on the fact that the Zealot has taken a little bit more damage earlier already. It's kind of like you already invested a lot of shots onto it. So the Zealot will back away to regen its shields. And now the Adept is starting to get worked on this. I love this wall off on the side of SKillous. If he is able to mitigate damage at the front, then he would be able to also keep units at the back to deal with a potential Oracle, for instance, though we know it's a Void Ray this time around.
Yeah, and you know, the Void Ray, I think it should be able to attack that gateway from like a safe spot as well, which might actually allow the Adept to shade on forward.
Yeah, I think that's exactly his plan, Ravi. You're spot on, and that's exactly what he's gonna do. The Adepts will start a shade very soon here, but actually SKillous overcharging the battery. I love that move as well. It's not the most intuitive move, but recognizing the threat of the Adepts right away is something that he chooses to do and will act upon it. It's gonna work out well for now.
Well, Shield Battery Overcharge has finally expired, and remember that Void Ray should be able to pretty safely attack that Warp Gate, but now that the Adepts, one of them goes down, and the other one was also pretty low on hit points, so I don't know if it's going to be worthwhile to just shade the Adepts in, but the Stasis Trap tries to catch him off guard, but SKillous on top of it gets 3 probes trapped.
Yeah, that's a couple too many, but it's not too bad. It's, you know, it's actually pretty decent. However, the second Oracle will make it so that these 2 Oracles can start one-shotting probes in spite of that shield battery. And these Oracles are kind of an unexpected choice, and the kind of thing that MaxPax is so very good at is identifying your weak spot and then trying to abuse it, right? So he opens with a Void Ray, and look at this. He has carved himself room to make a lot of damage happen with these Oracles. So very well done. 7 probes already going down. And with that, the advantage of SKillous is vanishing as he now trails in workers as well.
Losing the Oracle's not going to be ideal there, and MaxPax really could have gotten so much value out of having those 2 Oracles remain alive, but he is finally deciding to pull back. And yeah, I mean, consider it's not just even the worker damage that he was able to do. You look and see that SKillous, he's got up a Twilight Cancel, sure, but like he invested into 3 additional shield batteries, had to get this full wall on up. He can't really easily, well, I was going to say move out to expand to a 3rd or anything, but he actually does a very clever probe trick to get his probe out there, but now he can't get any actual units out there until he knocks down his gateways. So it just gets into like a kind of awkward position for SKillous.
Yeah, it really does. Now he has blink, so at least he's going to be able to blink out. There's a lot of shield batteries there spent. A nice trick to get out the probe just by making a building and not having enough space to wiggle. The probe will shift out of his own base, and with that he'll be able to take a 3rd without breaking his wall. So nice moves on the side of the Russian here.
Oh, blink available over here for SKillous. He can keep these stalkers alive and active out on the map with some good control. And he doesn't really have to worry as much about that Oracle just because he has that 1 shield battery. And, well, there's only the 1 Oracle. He doesn't have to worry about it breaking through with the damage. But these stalkers getting forced back as he sees that MaxPax is kind of still out of the map with that Void Ray and even more stalkers rallying on out. His own blink about to finish up. This 3rd base going to be under fire soon, but a lot of shield batteries getting started at that 3rd as well.
That's going to help a lot, but he has to be really careful. SKillous, that is, as MaxPax now has blink himself, so he's going to be blink microing here. The shield batteries finally come online and actually overcharged right away. Not sure if necessary. SKillous on the chase. He has more units. The Void Ray has already been taken down. I would not mind a blink forward here, and the Russian will do it to try and chase. Picks up 1 more stalker, and will reset things for the time being. Aftermath has MaxPax still at a 5-worker lead.
Yeah, that stasis trap catching a lot of workers over there. If MaxPax had been able to just back off and not really lose a whole lot after basically forcing the attention away from that main base, I would have loved this. MaxPax maybe going to get some stalkers in return for his troubles from earlier, and the sentries can't blink further out, so MaxPax going to be able to get some really good victories there.
Yeah, very dangerous position from SKillous to tuck himself so deep into that 3rd base area from MaxPax because MaxPax has blink, right? So he was playing almost as if MaxPax didn't have blink, but he knows that there is blink. So a little bit of a mistake on the side of the Russian as he's trying to push an advantage that was tiny to begin with. So if MaxPax was or had warped in anything, he would have had enough to deal with that. Now MaxPax on the counter offense, trying to do something similar, but in a much more open area is where the fight will start.
Oh, we're going to see that MaxPax has this weird problem over here, though. There are a lot of shield batteries at both the 3rd and the natural, so you can continue to kind of sit at the bottom of this ramp and try and take a few trades here and there with some good blink micro and overwhelming stalker counts, but pushing up either of these ramps is going to be difficult. It looks like he's kind of looking to try and move up that natural if he finds an opportunity, but that will also be a bit of a suicide mission.
Charges now finished for SKillous, so there could be a Zealot Warpin. I would love to see a Zealot Warpin, and with those Zealots, I think that SKillous can just collapse onto this army and start chasing, but instead he's going to warp in additional stalkers. He is confident in his micro, and he should be. He has the numbers to do it. He will blink on top of MaxPax's army and actually take a brilliant trade to equalize the supplies. Still MaxPax with a 10-worker lead, but that only means that SKillous has that much more army, and this time I don't mind this chase that much, especially with this recall being spent from MaxPax to his main.
Yeah, and now there's hardly any stalkers over here at the 3rd base. Shield batteries just getting focus fire down. Probes being pulled off the line. SKillous going to be able to find some really, really amazing value over here. He is going to have to be quick about it, though, because the Zealots and the Warp Prism in the main base have mostly been cleaned up. Now he's literally charging into the natural, taking out the shield battery there. And MaxPax, he's going to be coming in to a defensive choke. His own defensive choke is going to work against some of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And these Zealots are going to soak up so much damage potentially from SKillous. So this is going to be really helpful. But at the same time, MaxPax with his own Zealot Warpin, his charge is also ready. Continuing to abuse those chokes is SKillous. He will try. Oh, actually blinks defensively inside the main base. And that's going to condemn a few of these stalkers, these 3 at least, onto that high ground as they can no longer blink out. However, the reinforcing Zealots of SKillous were already warped in the low ground preemptively. So beautiful moves from him, anticipating that retreat will actually get him to save a lot of those stalkers, but 3 of them will get some doom pathing to tax 1 of them at least.
Yeah, Oracle continuing to go for a lot of these stasis traps here and there. I would actually not mind, like, I think there are some angles you could actually just go for the kills of that Oracle instead of the stasis traps, but regardless, doing a good job. I like that MaxPax throughout the fights has been able to keep that alive, but man, I feel like, Paulo, this is going to be a really tough point going forward for SKillous because these trades have been really impressive and SKillous has been able to find really nice positional plays, but now he's down 2 weapon upgrades, and that is going to make things so difficult for him to deal with.
Yeah, and this Oracle has continued to get value and be super annoying on the other side. Maybe SKillous, if he can fight a good fight, if he can find a good fight here in the middle of the map, if he could have caught either half of that army, that might have been a good engagement to take, but instead, the army of MaxPax is going to consolidate, and he has an extra Archon as well here, so he has to be really careful, SKillous, that is. He does have the Zealot advantage on the ground right now, but that Archon is the great equalizer for MaxPax. And there's a huge Danish army crossing the map right now.
Yeah, Zealot warping in the main base is going to try and buy a little bit of time and even just a few warp-ins, but like you were saying, that Archon going to be putting in work against any Zealots to charge on forward. MaxPax getting a little bit split up as his Zealots are getting into the natural as well as to the third base, so he's getting spread out very thin right now against units that have multiple shield batteries kind of helping out. And the main base, well, MaxPax finally does clean that up, so he's going to try pushing into this third base. All of his units focused over here. Zealot's coming in to reinforce from the natural of SKillous, getting a nice surround, but that Archon putting in work.
Yeah, great warpins regardless for SKillous. The Archon has now been sectioned off, and these Zealots are doing work, but the reinforcing Zealots of MaxPax himself are doing work. MaxPax does blink to get rid of that, what is that called? Ravi! But it doesn't matter, because, I mean... SKillous can still warp in here regardless of that Warp Prism. That's the name of the unit. Kind of inconsequential, but as will be SKillous' efforts when MaxPax just bulldozers through. Yeah, I think that it all comes down to the advantage, the economic advantage that MaxPax just held throughout the game. He always had like 5 and at some points 10 more workers than SKillous. So even though SKillous, like you were saying, was finding very good positional play, it just wasn't enough to make up for his economic deficit, it seems.
Yeah, I think one of the testaments to like truly great players a lot of the time is that when they're being attacked, they're finding ways to put on some even small form of counter pressure. So even when things were so hectic and he had Stalkers literally blinking in from his natural into his main, one extra thing that MaxPax was just finding the extra actions, the extra APM to do was throw down more stasis traps with his oracles in that main or the natural, and basically continuously doing a little bit of that harassment while also dealing with all these fights. Those small little things really do start to add up, especially when, you know, it's a hectic game and your opponent doesn't recognize it and you get, you know, 16 of your workers trapped in a stasis trap. It's like that's a substantial portion of your economy literally just not mining for 30 seconds or so.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, strategically and outside of those little details, SKillous only made one big blunder, I think, in moving those stalkers into the third base area of MaxPax. Like, that was a huge loss. But I feel like he recovered nicely, and I think it really came down to those little things that you're talking about. Those stasises were huge, and they weren't even reflecting necessarily on the worker production, right? So that adding up to the economic deficit that he was facing just by having less workers made it so that, you know, he ended up having just considerably less army for the very last engagement. And MaxPax so confident, I mean, pushing onto 3 shield batteries, knowing when the shield battery overcharge is about to run out and going in like a second or two before. He just played that really, really well. And yeah, let's see if SKillous can recover here on Juggernaut.
Yeah, heading on in game number 2. MaxPax, I do think for a lot of people who've been following the hype of MaxPax, especially after that win versus Showtime, kind of coming in as MaxPax being a little bit of the favorite here, but SKillous, or I should say this young lad down here on the bottom left-hand side of the map, still a force to be reckoned with from Cascade. He is, yeah, once again, SKillous.
And then in the top right-hand side, the great little Dane, it's MaxPax.
Great little Dane, I like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say the great Dane, but then he's the youngest player we have, so like it doesn't sound right, even though he is great. but great for some reason. You know, the feeling it evokes is of like size-wise. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking of dogs.
Yeah, when you said Great Dane, that's actually where my head went.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're big, right? So.
Yeah, they are. Well, you know, I have to say, some of these really young players are surprisingly tall. They're like,
true.
Like sometimes, okay, actually a good example is I remember when Peely was still a young up-and-comer and he was still, like, you know, barely just coming out of high school and stuff. And I meet him and I'm like, wait, dude, you're like 8 feet tall. This is ridiculous. You're supposed to be almost 10 years younger than me.
He is very tall, Peely.
Yeah.
Who else is tall?
Of the youngsters, Raynor is a little bit taller than I thought he would be, I think, in like 2017 or 2018.
Yeah, he was very short for a while, I guess. So yeah, you could anticipate.
Short for a while. Yeah, and then he really just grew into himself. I think SKillous was pretty tall, if I last recall. I'm like trying to do math too.
I don't think SKillous is very tall, actually.
Who?
SKillous? He's not very tall, I don't think.
Oh, really? Okay. Maybe I'm just misremembering. It's been too long.
Is Harstam the tallest player in StarCraft, or who is the tallest player?
I mean, he's tall. I don't know that he's the tallest.
Paying User used to be the tallest for sure.
Oh,
like many years back. He is.
Paying User was a giant, man.
Yeah, I remember Druby. I used to, you know, he was my best friend for a very long time. I lived together with him, and he was really tall. But when he would meet Paying User, they would like talk about like how tall they are, and they would swap stories about how tall they are, like running into spider webs and stuff like that you never think about as a short man. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah. Oh, got a nice little kind of a different wall in over here, by the way, from SKillous. He's got the 2 pylons at the front and has most of his production really kind of much further tucked back in, which is actually, it's kind of nice if there's like zealot warpins and stuff that comes in from the north side of his main. So you can have a little bit of a wall in going, makes it a little harder for the zealots to get on through. It takes a little longer, but you can still deal with the adepts with the 2 pylons. Just cute little differences that we see.
Yes, indeed. And this adept will survive with red HP, but of course it'll regen all of its shields. So effectively it's like surviving with half of its HP if it barely survives. And that's not too bad at all. On the side of SKillous, we see now the Twilight Council being dropped down. The adept will pay the price, however. So that is a nice little pickoff for SKillous, who now has nothing to worry about in terms of ground on his side of the map. But up in the air, there is an Oracle that's going to be flying in. Units already in position for it, though.
Yeah, I think that SKillous has everything he needs to make sure he's not taking too much damage against this. It's a very standard timing for this to come on in. There's a Void Ray follow-up behind it, and yeah, I actually really like just the Revelation being thrown down over here, keeping an eye on the units and everything. And he should, with that Revelation, even though it doesn't tag the Twilight Council, he gets vision barely around the units that are Revelation, so he actually does see the Twilight Council itself.
That is very, very true, as there is +1 attack as well coming on the side of SKillous. These attack upgrades are very important in the matchup, and I think that's one of the grounds where MaxPax you were talking about really coming on top of in the previous match. So we'll see if SKillous can hold that advantage and make it work for himself in this particular game.
Yeah. +2 weapon upgrades ahead of your opponent is an insane difference in PvP. +2 weapons is specifically a big number for a lot of damage point changes and stuff. But oh, nice pickoff on a Stalker over there. MaxPax even gets out without really taking a whole lot of damage on the Stalkers. Oh my God! Finally loses it, but he still gets 2 Stalkers in exchange, and now the Oracles come on in and are gonna be able to find quite a few probes in exchange.
Yeah, SKillous does a good job of focus firing the Oracle that he started firing at first, but still will lose 8 workers in the process. At the front, at least he deflects the attack, but Aftermath has him trailing by 7 workers. So a very good start for MaxPax. SKillous at the same time is going for a greedy third. If unpunished, he will have the... Yeah, you're right. There's no Observer, right?
There's no Robo. He has a Forge. He's gonna literally have to rely. I mean, granted,
yeah, he's dead. right?
After yesterday, my mind has been open to the possibility of a Protoss player somehow defending with no Robo or Forge out, but or no cannons out. But you know,
there's a cannon. There's a cannon coming down in the natural. There's a cannon coming down in the natural. Okay. Perfect timing as well, I think. The 1DT is a slow warp in. Luckily for SKillous, who is moving across the map with his sentries and stalkers. This will be relatively easy to deflect for MaxPax if he should choose to warp in a DT. I don't see any answers coming in the long term though, and this third is still exposed.
Yeah, one sentry goes down, but in exchange for a stalker over there, that third base, like you were saying, still exposed. The oh my god, the cannon finishes up, but the DT just walks straight past it, and there is still no detection there. But these stalkers starting to make their way forward, and they're going to be able to focus fire down that shield battery very easily. Defensive DT warped in though.
Yeah, good warping from SKillous to try to mitigate that DT surface area onto the cannon, but MaxPax is gonna notice and just go around an attempt at a force field, but it's not gonna work out. And I mean, with that, it's gonna be very difficult for SKillous to hold on to anything at his main, and his third now also under siege from this second DT, who is gonna attempt to join the first one in the main, seeing as he's doing a lot of free damage there. This looks very difficult for the Russian now.
Yeah, so here's another really big problem right now, Paulo. I don't think that a cannon's gonna get up at the third. Like, I actually think the third will die if even just one more DT goes there. I don't think that the observer will pop out in time. Oh god, that is,
oh god.
Things are just all spiraling out of control right now for SKillous.
Yeah, I mean, even if he was able to save both bases, his mining will have been so skewed by this entire time. It's like, you know, imagine like a really long stasis trap on like half of his probes, right? Because he's just unable to mine, and another DT will ensure that MaxPax can take that third base. Good force fields, excellent force fields to wipe out for the observer, but it's not gonna be enough. A valiant attempt from SKillous, but MaxPax now even bringing the force of his stalkers to not just escort this Archon out, but also take care of the army of SKillous at the third. And with that, I mean, he gets himself a, this is pretty much just over.
Yeah, cannon gets taken out on the low ground. There it is, GG. Well